Thank you for downloading from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Support for this podcast comes from your generous gifts and donations. You can find out more about Ravi Zacharias and the team at www.rzim.org.
And so when we look at the new spirituality, I don't mean to make light of it because I think their pursuits are very genuine. There's a lot of disillusionment, a lot of disheartening responses. And the irony is almost every one of the authors that I read was at one time an evangelical. Just walked away from it all into this wide quicksand of trying to find something spiritual.
Hello, and welcome to a new week here on Just Thinking. The word spirituality is both a mindset and a topic of discussion. But even as Christians, the word can become just a catchphrase. You might say we know Jesus spiritually, but do you actually know him? This week, Ravi Zacharias examines what spirituality in the Christian faith really means and how it should impact our relationship with Christ. Here's Ravi with part one of his message titled, The Greatness of Jesus Christ.
Years ago, when I was going through an MRI before my back surgery, I don't know how many of you have had that done, but it was designed by a sadist because they put you in this sarcophagi type thing and they shut you in. And to boot, they bind your feet down and tell you not to move for about 45 minutes. Now, it's tough enough for me to take an elevator that's stuck for 45 minutes, but to be in that something like that. And the man looked at me before he wheeled me in and he said, "Is there anything you want to ask me before I put you in there?" And I said, "Yes. As long as I'm in here, will you please remain out there so that I can connect with you if I need you?" And as they put me into that thing, I thought to myself, what a terrible thing it would be if you were stuck in there and there was nobody to talk to. Nobody could get you out. That's really what we mean by a closed system, something that's hermetically sealed ideationally. There is no idea coming in from the outside. That's why Solomon said, under the sun, everything is meaningless. What he really meant by this, that if there is no outside input into your pursuits, your dreams, your aspirations, it is all a chasing after the wind and everything is vanity. That was said by a man who was both intellectually and existentially very successful. He was a writer of Proverbs, a writer of Psalms. The Queen of Sheba said, when you go and see him, not even the half is told of what this man actually knows. He had a harem and all the pleasures that a man desires, says the Bible, but he said everything was a chasing after the wind under the sun. And so when we look at the new spirituality, I don't mean to make light of it because I think their pursuits are very genuine. There's a lot of disillusionment, a lot of disheartening responses. And the irony is almost every one of the authors that I read was at one time an evangelical. Just walked away from it all into this wide quicksand of trying to find something spiritual. But there's heavy stuff, and before I do that, I'd like to tell you a couple of lighthearted stories that apply to what I'm going to say. This was sent to me quite a while ago. As a bagpiper, I play many gigs. Recently, I was asked by a funeral director to play at a graveside service for a homeless man. He had no family or friends, so the service was to be at a pauper cemetery in the Kentucky backcountry. As I was not familiar with the backwoods, I got lost. I finally arrived an hour late and saw the funeral guy had already gone, and the hearse was nowhere in sight. There were only the diggers and crew left, and they were eating lunch. I felt bad and apologized to the men for being late. I went to the side of the grave and looked down at the vault, and the vault lid was already in place. I didn't know what else to do, so I started to play. The workers put down their lunches and began to gather round. I played out my heart and soul for this man with no family and friends. I played like I've never played before for this homeless man. And as I played Amazing Grace, the workers began to weep. They wept, I wept, we all wept together. When I finished, I packed up my bagpipes and started for my car. Though my head hung low, my heart was full. As I opened the door to the car, I overheard one of the workers say, "Never seen nothing like that before, and I've been putting in septic tanks for 20 years. You know, Sherlock Holmes and Watson were on a camping trip. They were lying inside their tent, and in the middle of the night, Holmes woke up and looked into the night sky, and he said, "Watson, what do you see?" He says, "Astronomically, I see that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets." He said, "Astrologically, I see that Saturn is in Leo. Theologically, I see that God is sovereign and we are quite finite. Orologically, I see that it's about 3:15 in the morning. Meteorologically, I see that tomorrow is going to be a beautiful day. Why? What do you see, Holmes?" He said, "Watson, you idiot, somebody has stolen our tent." You know what? We can have all of these very soporific sounding musical notes and hum our way into thinking we've actually done something wonderful. And the people around us have no clue what we're doing. We can have all the big terms, meteorologically, orologically, theologically, astronomically, and all this stuff, and not know that the tent is gone. And the church sometimes is speaking to an audience that is completely perplexed with what we're talking about. And those into spirituality and naturalism can use all the big terms and not realize that the tent is gone. And oftentimes in this no man's land of us communicating to an audience that doesn't understand and them using terminology that leaves people mesmerized but unaware that there's no ground and foundation on which they are standing. In this world of jargon and all the polysyllabic words they can use, mantra and chakra and tantra and all this stuff, at the end of the day you say, what does all this stuff really mean? What does it really mean? You know what I find ironic about this, and I say this very truthfully, and I don't say it to mock anything, but I was born and raised in India. My ancestors were Orthodox Hindu priests. They came from the highest caste of the Hindu priesthood called the Nambudris. When the Apostle Thomas went to India, the first audience he really wanted to reach were the Nambudris, and several Nambudri priests came to know Christ under Thomas's teaching, and that's when he was executed. There are markers in Kerala and in the southern city of Chennai to commemorate Thomas's visit out there. And in this tremendous corpus of material that we call Hinduism, it also incorporates an awful lot of mythological stuff, included in which now is this horrendous dogma of the caste system, which actually tells you that some people are born untouchable. In all this chaotic stuff, there are people in that part of the world who are desperately seeking for answers. My meetings in the early part of September, for the third or fourth time now, will be with the Bollywood film stars, highly successful icons. And they do it in a closed door setting and ask me to speak and ask their questions. The last time I spoke at one of the film settings there, my colleague Krin was with me, and my wife and a few others. There were big names in Indian films out there, and I asked to speak on life beyond the box office. And one of the biggest names in the Indian film industry took me aside and was surrounded by students and others, and he said to me, "To be honest with you, I was disappointed with your talk." I said, "You were?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Tell me." He said, "You know what I struggle with? I struggle with what goes on inside me, and I cannot explain it." And you did not address that at all. I said, "Mahesh," and I pointed to the head of the institution. I said, "I was his guest. He gave me a theme. And I'm very careful when I come to India to make sure I don't start off with your theme and end up with mine. I try to honor the theme that is given. But I'll tell you what, if you want me to address what you've talked about, bring me back and I'll talk about it. And he looked at the man, the head of the institute. He said, let's get you back for a week. He said, because this is the kind of issue we all wrestle with. And so here they are, Orthodox, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, skeptics and all, who are looking for answers through Jesus Christ. Then we've got our own icons out here who are going into all kinds of modes of spirituality, most of the terms of which they really don't even understand. Jesus has been lost in all of this. And I want to set up as quickly as I can. We don't have much time. And the book will give you a fuller detail. But as I was tracing my own journey in this, on the lostness of God in the midst of it, there were 3 passages that came to mind. You don't need to make a note of it. You're probably familiar with it. And if you start taking notes here, you'll sort of lose your way in the sequence of thinking here. But in 2 Kings 22, you've got a story of a young boy who's 8 years old who becomes king. His name is Josiah. When he was a teenager, he began to seek after God. I want to stop right here and talk to those of you in your teens. This man, as a teenager, began to seek after God. He was only 8 when the throne fell upon him. And as a teenager, he began to hunger after God. Think about it. In his mid-20s, he called the priests together and said, the temple is completely messed up. I want you boys to clean it up. And in his mid-20s, they discovered something. In the temple of God, they had lost the book of the law. When the high priest found this and called the secretary and told him, we've just found the book of the law, we didn't know where it had been lost, and it's right here in the temple. You know, if the book of the law had been lost in some other arena or some museum somewhere, you could understand it. When it's lost in the very house of God, you realize something radically had gone wrong.
We have to end today's program there, but if you would like to purchase a copy of this message, call us at 1-800-448-6766 and ask for the title, The Greatness of Jesus Christ. Or you can order online at rzim.org, where you can find out more about the ministry of RZIM, donate to our efforts, or sign up for one of our online resources. For those listening in Canada, that website is rzim.ca.
This is Ravi Zacharias, and I just wanted to take a minute to share this verse with you today. Matthew 11:28 and 29 says this, Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. No matter what you're going through today, I hope you'll take time to reflect on these beautiful words and find rest in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Just Thinking is a listener-supported radio ministry and is furnished by Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia,